Hello, welcome to A Crohn's Disease Life. This is Michael Weiss, I'm your host. It's been quite a while since I've done a show, and for those of you who wondered where I've been, I got very sick over the summer and had to be hospitalized. So this show is going to be a day in the life of a hospital patient, but this is part one of probably 3 parts. I want to go slow. But before I get into the show, for those of you who haven't watched before, Crohn's disease is an incurable illness. I live with it, I manage it, it's a chronic illness, it's tough. But through the help of my friends and my family, I'm able to get by. And I think the last month is a good example of that. I'm looking down at my notes, but I was hospitalized from August 16th to August 21st for tests. Then I had surgery August 26th to September 2nd. I was discharged September 2nd, got very ill. Luckily, I stayed near the hospital. Had to be readmitted, and on September 3rd I was rehospitalized, readmitted till September 18th. So what I'm going to talk about in terms of a day in the life of a hospital patient is a composite of my 20 years of being hospitalized. I'm going to take stories from here or there, so I don't want to sort of, get any particular hospital trouble. This is just a composite story. It's funny, it's sad, it's very difficult, and at times emotionally trying. In my particular case, this last hospital stay was very far away from where my family and friends are. And I would highly encourage people, only do that if you have a very quick hospital stay, like a quick surgery. That's all. Mine was only supposed to be a quick surgery. But as it got longer, anything over 2 weeks becomes oppressive. And you need support. You need your family and friends just to get through it, because otherwise you're going to go insane. So let me just talk about, before I get into the day-to-day, let me just talk about the personalities you'll meet, and we'll keep this this particular episode all at that. First of all, nurses. Doctors give orders, but nurses execute them. They're your best friends in the hospital. 99% of the time, they're incredible. Really incredible. But once in a while you run across a very procedural type nurse who just cares more about protecting her job, I guess she should, and is more allegiant to the doctor than she is to you. It's sort of, some nurses though really are your advocate with doctors, because doctors sometimes can be kind of difficult to deal with. So nursing is very important, and as time goes on, I think nurse practitioners are going to be key to the healthcare system, because they're very smart, they're very good, but they're probably less expensive than doctors. So nursing, try to develop a great relationship with your nurses, and they're a conduit for you to get to your doctors. I have listed here transport people. These are folks who are like elderly volunteers or young volunteers who take you from test to test in the hospital. Rather insignificant, but they're very nice people. It sort of gives you a little break from the crazy personalities you meet in the hospital. Surgeons, okay, very important. Surgeons are very skilled people. They're very smart about a particular area, but don't mistake that for them being God, because they sometimes think they are. I've had situations where surgeons would say, "I'm not listening to you. This is all about your surgery. Let me fix it." I'm like, please look here or look there. And then I realized, wait a second, I need a gastroenterologist. That's a doctor. That's a medical doctor. They're going to look for clues. A surgeon is going to look to perfect what he or she did, for the most part. So they're great, they're needed, they're necessary. But when you go to a surgeon for an opinion, don't be surprised if they tell you, "I want to operate," because that's what they do. I've learned that the hard way. Residents are like, right out of medical school, first year. Now, in a teaching hospital, you're going to come across them. I've had hilarious experiences with residents that weren't so hilarious to me at the time. For example, after being in this particular hospital for like 3 or 4 weeks, being on tons of drugs, including Tums, some innocuous drug, I was taking like 5 or 6 a day. I got transferred to a different wing. I was in agony. I was in so much pain. And a resident, they usually have the residents do the take-in work. He starts asking me all these questions. I am in so much pain. I'm like, please give me some medicine and then I will talk to you. He's like, in a second. I want to be a friend. I don't want to be your friend. Please give me medicine. Anyways, we fought. He gave me medicine. Okay, everything was fine. About an hour later, I asked my nurse for a Tums. She comes back with a half a Tums. I just looked at her. I said, what am I, 6 years old? Are you kidding me? A half a Tums? This resident kind of needed to tweak my medications, but because he couldn't tweak the real medications, he tweaked the Tums. He gave me a half a Tums. I was so angry, but it was sort of comical at the time. So, listen, some residents are great, and unfortunately, if you go to a hospital, you're giving your body up for them to learn, and they have to learn, because 5 years from now, that resident may save your life. But sometimes, after you've been in the hospital 3 weeks, it's like, please, I don't want to deal with these residents anymore. And that particular resident, it was like he was reading from a textbook on how to do bedside manner. So that's what you're going to come across. Fellowship. These are much more advanced. They're higher than residents. They're almost as good as the doctors, and sometimes they could be so great for you because they're not nearly as arrogant as the doctors or the surgeons. They don't think they're God yet. They know they're going to be God, but they're not God yet. So until they become God, they're very nice to you. So try to develop a relationship with the fellows. Pain management staff, I always talk about that. In my case, pain is a big problem, but sometimes in a hospital, sorry about the background noise, I'm in New York City at a buddy's house because I'm being hospitalized again on Tuesday. Unfortunately, they haven't figured out what's wrong with me. But pain management can be very, very helpful. And in my case, I went to the hospital with a history of being on this drug or that drug, and I knew my dosages a little too carefully. And it took a while for the doctors to understand I'm not crazy. It's just I see doctors, I'm very responsible about it. But I think in this last case with me, I think the hospital had a protocol of medication that you couldn't go past that. It was for patient safety. However, I had a colonoscopy at the hospital, and they said they gave me medication. It didn't work. Then they said, okay, we're going to double the medication. It didn't work. Then they tripled the medication. It didn't work. They had to abandon the colonoscopy and give it to me under general anesthesia. Now, I have never had a colonoscopy and had that problem. So I think that some hospitals sort of say you can't give a patient this dose of medication, it's too dangerous. And while they say it's for patient safety, I really think it's to cover their ass, pardon my language. But there are some pain management doctors who will look at the patient and listen to the patient and say, given your past history, this is what we're going to give you. That's the kind of pain management doctor you need. Now, I'm a very difficult patient. I am sure I am a crazy patient when I'm in pain, as you will be. But unfortunately, it's not my problem. It's the hospital's problem. I had a situation in the last hospital where, because of the pain medication, they put your finger on an oxygen reader to see if your respiration is okay. That is to save your life, because the more medication you get, the lower your respiration is. Well, in my case, every time I dozed off to sleep, my respiration lowered and this siren would ring, which was, again, to save my life. You could hear it in 4 states away from where my hospital room was. And I complained to the nurse. I said, can you please turn that off? She said, no. You either take the medication and deal with the siren, or you get rest. I'm like, you mean you can't get pain medication and get rest in a hospital at the same time? No. I'm like, that makes no sense. So I started screaming. Next thing I know, she calls security. I have a shrink, literally a psychiatrist, coming to visit me. It's like 4 o'clock in the morning, and a security guard. I'm like, what are you doing here? Get the doctor. So finally the doctor comes, and I explained the problem. He said, no problem. We'll just turn the oxygen thing off. But you know what the risks are. I said, yes, I do know. It's just, it's too low of a rate. You guys are protecting me too much, and I need to sleep. I said to the nurse, why couldn't you just call the doctor? They said, well, you have to make a big enough stink for that to happen. And I'm like, I can't believe you're putting me through all this. So my last experience was very difficult, and maybe I'm jumping around a bit, but pain management needs to medicate you based upon your background, not some hospital protocol. So they must listen. And I find that doctors often, when you're the patient, no matter how articulate you are, they don't listen to you. They look at you as some compromised patient, person, whatever. That's where your support system comes in handy. Whether it's your friends or your family, they become your patient advocates. They must call the doctors. They'll say, my son or my brother or my friend is not crazy. This is his background. So don't be surprised if you come across this. The last thing I want to say in this episode is that nights in a hospital and weekends in a hospital, all bets are off. It's almost as if hospitals operate under the theory that your illnesses, whether it's Crohn's disease or cancer, they take the weekend off. They take nights off. Like they don't, act up, because you get a complete sort of second, third, fourth tier team. Now, I understand doctors have to rest, obviously. Whether they work 8 hours, 10 hours, I understand it. I don't understand why the second team isn't as qualified as the first team. And they can't do anything unless they call the head doctor. So really, it defeats the whole purpose. Because with me, and I'm sure with you, my illness has a mind of its own. It gets sick at 3 o'clock in the morning. Who's going to help me then? I have to wait for like 3 hours for it to go from the covering doctor to the main doctor, back to the doctor in the hospital, or maybe to the fellow. It's a system that doesn't make sense. It's like a 9-to-5 system, as if my illness has discipline. It's absolutely crazy. So a hospital patient experience could be just real easy in and out, but after a couple of days it becomes a very difficult experience. It's almost like being in prison. Everyone means well, they give you medication. It's very difficult, and you need support to get through it. In the next episode, I'm going to go through what it's like day to day, but I'll try to get to that later today or maybe early tomorrow, because I am going back in the hospital. But from the bottom of my heart, I really appreciate everyone who's been following me and listening to me and sending good thoughts my way, because I'm not out of the woods yet. Thank you.